This is Tamara Rockwood from Bainbridge Island Press in the Pacific Northwest. We are Bainbridge Island Press. We publish poetry. We publish only poetry, and that is what makes us so happy. Poetry is part of life. It is part of our literary heritage. Poetry is universal. You can find poetry of forms everywhere in every year that has ever been around. This is just exactly what I want to do with my life, is bringing poetry to people and also bringing people in so I can publish them, because our voices are so important. When we hear the voices of people around us or far away or from long ago, that is what I think is keeping us together in one way. There are other ways, but this is what I can do. And so I'm doing it. So thank you for being here. On POETICS Podcast, we are going to be bringing these poets to you so that they can read their own work and you can hear their voices, and that adds layers of meaning that only they can reveal. And in the future, we're going to be having featured guests to explore the poems that have shaped their lives, because poetry shapes all of our lives. There's poetry everywhere you look, and a lot of times we don't see it. There was one time I was at the mall. I had to get shoes with the kids, and there was a space where a group, a model railroad group set up, and they wanted to show people their model railroads because it's a very long tradition, and I don't know anywhere else that I would find it. It was amazing. So I took the kids in there and we walked around. They showed us the trains and how it worked and the engine. It was wonderful. And I think that is really exciting. That's a passion that people have. But what was interesting is on the walls, the gentlemen that were in charge of this model railroad community had written poems about railroads and about trains, and there was poetry on the walls. And I showed my kids, and I'm like, it's everywhere. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're fishing. It doesn't matter if you're on a railroad. It doesn't matter if you're knitting. It doesn't matter if you're an artist. It doesn't matter if you are a doctor. William Carlos Williams was a physician. It is impervious. And I love shining the light on all of it. So today, we are going to hear from Ben Rockwood, and he is going to discuss a poem that is wonderful and fascinating, and I'll let him talk about it. So, in the meantime, grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and join us as we dive into the world of poetry. Welcome to POETICS Podcast.
Today's selection was a really interesting book that is not really a great one or particularly well suited for being read aloud, particularly on a podcast like this. So I apologize if the reading of the poems felt a little odd. But I've fallen in love with N.H. Pritchard for a couple of reasons that we'll go into. First, a little story. So I had never heard of N.H. Pritchard, but there are a lot of poets in the world, and so it's not hard for some eclectic poets to go sort of under the radar. My family and I were doing a trip in the New England, and we were at one of my favorite places in the world, which is the MIT bookstore. Fantastic place for MIT Press and all manner of other fantastic books. And as I was looking about, enamored with all the great titles that were there, there was a strange-looking man in a suit and tie with a fantastic mustache and just peering eyes from the cover of this book, peering at me from across the bookstore, actually. And I just was enamored with this image on the cover, and went over, and it was this poetry book called The Matrix, poems by N.H. Pritchard. And, the cover image is just haunting. I mean, just, it's a good looking man. Just a really literary sort of face. And I was surprised that it was a poetry book and not something else. And as I looked through it, I really was just blown away. I am not as educated as Tamara, and so, I'll have to defer to her for some of the terminology here. But you may have at some point come across poetry that really focused on using the page. So, words in different sort of configurations, right? Now, a number of the poems that I read, a lot of them are sort of written very specifically with word breaks sort of there, where it's just sort of a collection of sort of words that come together. But many of his other poems go beyond even poetry into really almost being art pieces on the page. And so as a book designer at Bainbridge Island Press, I'm really fascinated with the page and the use of the page. It's fairly common to see poets want everything to be sort of centered on the page, breaks to be in certain places on the page. Once in a while, we'll see shapes. We've got a couple of poets who've liked to do sort of shapes where there's a sort of, pyramid sort of shape as the lines get longer, line by line by line. In page 61 of this book, there was a poem called Sail. And it's a good poem, but what's interesting is the shape of the lines combined with a repeating O character for about 10, 12 lines, creates the sort of silhouette of a sail on the page, which is really pretty neat. But some of his stuff gets really, really wild. He has certain pages where it's just, one word repeated over and over and over and over at the bottom of the page. Then you flip to the next page and it's a different word, but it's, spread out over a single page. Some pages where it's the same word repeated from top to bottom. And then, the other page is inverted upside down. Just some really fascinating things that really just don't translate well to audio. But I wanted to use this forum as a way to sort of make you aware of him. So if you're, graphically inclined poet or lover of poetry, and you're really interested in where can I see a place where poetry and graphic art and structure really sort of come together, he's the place to be. One of the early pages in the book actually says this: words are ancillary to content. And he certainly put that into practice. It's a book that needs to be seen to be appreciated. I really would encourage you to go and pick up this book, go and look it out. I'm sure you can find it a couple of places. Of course, we would prefer that you go to your favorite independent bookstore and ask for it there and special order it. But really should be on everyone's shelf. Incredible work of art. Hard to sum up, but one that I think will leave an indelible mark and certainly speaks to a really interesting sort of time in the growth of art, of several different art forms coming together in the 1960s. So, N.H. Pritchard, The Matrix, Poems, 1960 to 1970. I highly recommend that you check it out. You'll be glad that you did.
That is all for today, poetry friends. I hope that you have enjoyed listening to this amazing poem. You need to see it on the page. You have to find the book. It's a very physical poem. So go find it. It's in your bookstore. But if you've enjoyed diving into the world of verse with us, please join us next time. We've got more poets to meet, more poems to explore, and more literary adventures to share. Until then, keep reading, keep writing, and keep poetry close to your heart. Thank you for joining POETICS Podcast, where we bring poetry to life, one verse at a time.